So for our last session that I get, last presentation I get to chair today, we have, and again, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, we have Gazi Hassan from the University of Waikato. Are remittances a source of finance for private adaptation strategy? Evidence from the cyclone Sida hit regions in southern Bangladesh. And I believe you're online, Gazi. Are you there?
Yeah, hi. Thanks. You pronounced my name exactly as it is, so
that's great.
Nothing to be sorry. And yeah, so I am going to present my paper, which is about, as the name suggests, remittances. So basically, remittances is the word used in the literature, which is actually the money sent by the migrants to their families at home. So let me share my screen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see that. That's
all
great.
right, cool. So our remittances are a source of adaptation finance.
Can you put it into presentation mode for us?
Yeah, I'm going to just do that. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I have like 3 screens. All right, so here we go. So I'm Gazi Hassan. I'm a senior lecturer at Waikato University Economics Department, and my primary area of research is migration in developing country, and on top of that, like basically how the families use the money that they receive from the migrants. Now, so Bangladesh is considered. I have 20 minutes, right? Or
yes, you've got 20 minutes, and then 5 minutes discussion and 5 minutes Q&A.
Okay. So so Bangladesh it's one of the most climate vulnerable countries. It is a high risk country in terms of many climate change related issues. One of them is cyclones. Okay, it is affected by cyclones, regularly, and one of the reasons that it had a it had broken away from its previous country, Pakistan, was that there was a severe cyclone in 1969. What 500,000 people had died in one night, and then at that time, like the authority from the West Pakistan region, they didn't do enough, and that built up a severe sort of mistrust and with the authority, and eventually led to the declaration of independence. Okay, among with other things. But the main point of saying is that cyclone is something that happens all the time in Bangladesh, and it is like a real concern. Okay, and not only in Bangladesh, there are lots of area in the world which is like really affected by cyclone every year. So this is kind of the cyclone area in Bangladesh, Bay of Bengal. This is the region where the cyclone. So basically June to November is the cyclone year, and every year some high intensity category 5 low intensity cyclones are forming. Thank you. So the major sort of motivation for the research is that there are major storm mitigation programs funded through the government and some other development agencies and civil societies, but this is not enough. I mean, the government is facing difficulty. I mean, think of Bangladesh as it's a poor country, and then I mean, obviously they don't have all the resources to go and help out the families who are being affected by cyclone on a sort of frequent basis. Okay. So the governments are being unable to really protect those families who are most affected by cyclones. And other than that, there are evidence that many government government programs for cyclone mitigation are uncoordinated. So there are money invested, but actually these are not giving enough benefit. Okay. On the other hand, what sometimes it is sort of not, what should I say? It is missed, or it is not really understood well. Is this that the people who are affected by cyclone, they actually have their own strategies, to protect themselves from, some sort of storm surges, and things like that. Okay. And which means that they undertake some investments to protect themselves, anyways, be it very small investment, or a medium-sized investment, or long-term investment, or short-term investment, but they do something to sort of protect themselves. I mean, they don't really wait for the government to do something, and then and be rest assured on that. Okay. So so my research idea comes from the fact that migration usually is a kind of a, is a measure to diversify family income if there is income shock. So which is often sort of termed as, an adaptation strategies by IOM and others. Okay. And also the remittances, or the money sent by the migrants to the family. Okay. This is something like an insurance, so if there is a, natural disaster, then there are lots of, evidence that, so the lots of, right after the natural disaster, there are remittances, surge, to help the people who are affected. Okay. So in general, we are thinking of how a typical household finance, or if there is if they're affected by cyclone or some natural disaster, how a typical household in the village, in Bangladesh, where you got the data, is like in the southern part of the Bangladesh. It's the most remote part of the Bangladesh, like really poor people. And then how do they manage themselves when in case of this kind of cyclones? And so my study, and there are other government agencies study, and also they say that either they use their savings, or they borrow, okay, or they wait for donation, not for the government, but donation from the the people within the community, or help from the relatives and friends, and selling assets. These are the five ways people try to sort of use the money to protect themselves. Now what we have found out is that there are various studies confirming that remittances is one of the sources of income in those families, because one or two members are outside working and sending money, so it adds up to the other sources of income. And usually it alleviates a credit constraint or budget constraint, and improves the credit worthiness of the people living in that area, so they can borrow more, or they can generate asset accumulation. Okay. And remittances, the variation of that is found to be connected with the variation in the severity and the frequency of natural disasters. So from these sort of observations, we asked, we posed the question whether there is a link between the remittances that the fund remittances that the household receive is somehow financing the adaptation expenditures that they undertake after a storm surge. And through our study, we have found that these are the type of adaptation expenditures, or these are the type of activities that a household will undertake, to invest to protect themselves from cyclones. Or so it's going to be converting a mud-built house into brick-built house, or raising the height of the homestead, increase the number of floors in the house, installation of tube well for drinking water, modernization of toilet, improvement of domestic animal sheds, ponds, improvement of boundaries of the house, raising plants. These are the, these are not all, but mainly these are the areas where the households would invest. So what we did is basically, the theory says that if there is some sort of disaster event, there are 2-3 factors that have already been researched, like the perception of natural disaster risk and the community's access to publicly sponsored storm protection programs. So if they have those access, then so that there is one sort of response. Okay. But what we did is this: we we incorporated the role of remittance private fund, in that process of how an individual household will adapt to or respond to a natural disaster event again. And there are some studies, like those studies are very empirical or data analysis kind of studies. There are some studies in qualitative analysis and all. So what we try to do is that we first try to understand that what framework leads to people to sort of invest in private protection strategies, and how remittance get into that space. Okay. So we first propose, a theoretical argument to sort of find out in which way the relationship will go, and then it is an endogenous risk framework. And so when after in an adverse storm event, we sort of there is a probability of this happening and not happening, and this probability are endogenous, like it depends on what actions you undertake. So given that, we had a sort of 2 variable sort of maximization problem, and then there's some anyways. So let's skip this, and then what we want to focus on is on this table is that we did find a sort of relation between the private defensive expenditures and remittances. Okay, but the thing is it can go both ways. Okay, and because it can go both ways, so the best that we could do is to approach it from an empirical point of view. So we got to the area, and then collected some data and all, and because we didn't have so this is the area where we collected data from. So this is the almost the southernmost corner of Bangladesh, and then and very highly sort of prone to cyclones and all these things. So in the 1969 cyclone, it happened in here, like so all over this region, like 100,000 people died, and and all. So given that the number of deaths due to cyclone has come down, drastically in Bangladesh, but the damages to property still remains. So we did survey the area. We actually surveyed about 600 households, and then but unfortunately we didn't have many households who had a foreign sort of migrants. We had with domestic migrants, but we were looking at the households with foreign migrants, and we didn't have many. So about 100 households were with foreign migrants, and then of that there was some missing data issues and all, like so the power of our econometric model is quite limited, in the sense that our data sort of boiled down in the end to only 75 observations. But so what we tried to do is estimate the relation between remittances and the CEDAR. CEDAR is the in 2007 that's category 5 sort of massive cyclone that happened during that area, and then the damages were so sort of detrimental that people there are still investing in private adaptation due to the losses that they had incurred during that period. So CEDAR is the post-cyclone expenditure on home improvement for household I, and then remit is the receipt of foreign remittances. Because of reverse causality, and also we chose an instrumental variable technique, and we used two variables. One is the distance to from the household to the nearest vehicular road, which is connected to the city. And then also another is the distance to the nearest primary school. But we mainly use this one, the first one. Okay. And the first stage relationship is kind of like, if the distance is if there's a long distance, it means that there are like kind of poverty and lack of amenities. So people will want to, some people from the household may want to migrate, and that's why they will send more remittances. So that we expect a kind of a positive correlation between distance and remittance. So using that, we put it into our regression model. And then one of the predictions of our model was this, that how much remittance a household gets also depends on what are the level of government expenditure or on a government programs in that area. So so which basically means that say for example you live close to embankment, so your houses are kind of secure. So that's why you feel secure in investing in your property. So so if you get more remittances, you invest more in the property. So there is kind of a sort of relation between the remittance received and the government public program. So that's why we included a sort of interaction between remittance and access. And access is a variable that we measured in terms of the distance of the household to the nearest cyclone shelter from the house. Okay.
And Gazi, just letting you know, you've got 4 minutes left.
Okay, all right. Thanks. No problem. I'll try to wrap up. Okay. So this is the result we got actually. So the IV results are like kind of like if you have 1,000 taka, that is our currency, 1,000 taka additional receipts of remittance. Okay, you spend about $10 or 10 taka, or in adaptation, and then and these variables I put these variables because to do for the check for the exclusion restriction criteria. Because they are related to the instrument. Okay, so for that reason, I needed to check whether they have a direct effect on the outcome variable, which is CEDAR. Okay, I mean the expenditure on home improvement of the CEDAR. So including this, none of the variables are significant. So we kind of like be confident on the identification that it wasn't contaminated. So so the first stage statistics is about F-stat is 21 and 13, which is slightly, which is above than 10, the rule of thumb. Okay. And the remittance coefficient in the reduced form equation has a positive coefficient, and which is significant. So which confirms the first stage relationship. So under that criteria, we are reasonably confident that we have identified our impact on the. So we can say that remittance has a positive impact on post cyclone expenditures. So the reason that we do this is that there are $500 billion remittances which are transferred worldwide every year. Okay. And even if a fraction of that is used for adaptation, okay, it can actually help, like mitigate some of the problems. Okay. And that's why we think that I mean, there is some studies which shows that the migrants can influence their expenditures in the home or in decision making in the home. For example, in Bangladesh, there's a study shows that most Bangladeshis goes to sort of Saudi Arabia and UAE for migrant works, and now going there they become too religious, and after they become actually ultra religious. And so now what is happening in the last 10-20 years, most of the children of these migrant families are now going to madrasa. Madrasa means religious schools. And then 20 years back, they would never go to religious schools. So which means that migrants can actually sort of force decision making in the families left behind. So in that manner, migrants who are living here, okay, they can be targeted by the donor agencies and the governments and all, so that if they can be sort of targeted, then that you need to sort of spend in these areas. Or like in Bolivia, what has happened? Bolivian migrants in Spain, they had been marketed a water heater, and then the spending, the price for the water heater was paid through remittances through the migrants. So it was a direct payment. So that was some sort of remittance mechanism they have used to some sort of policies for adaptation expenditures. Okay, so that's the purpose. Like my research is still going on, and then I'm trying to get fund for a bigger level study, and to find out and see how exactly this $500 billion sort of transferred circulation of money worldwide can be used somehow for some sort of adaptation purpose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gazi.
Yeah.
So now we have Iftikhar, who's also doing some research in that area, that geographical area at least. So Iftikhar, you've got 5 minutes to discuss. Could you just unshare your screen, please, Gazi, so we can get his slides up for you?
Okay. Just sorry. How to do that? Oh. Thank you.
Awesome. Just sharing Iftikhar's slides now.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Working. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Gazi, to actually look into a very relevant study with Bangladesh context. I'm from Bangladesh, so I pretty much see the significance of the study. The paper I will discuss today is written by Saqib Mahmood and Gazi Hassan. The paper title is "Are Remittances a Source of Finance for Private Adaptation Strategy? Evidence from Cyclone Cedar hits region of southern Bangladesh." So let me first start with the purpose. So the paper is basically look into two main questions. Research question. The first one is, do remittance contribute to private adaptation strategy? The second one is, do remittance have a causal effect on household investment in adaptation? The research is actually choose a very significant event in Bangladesh, which occurred in 2016, called Cyclone Cedar. You can see in this map the Cedar from Bay of Bengal. It goes relatively across the Bangladesh, but the strongest heat was on the bottom near to the Bay of Bengal. And the researcher actually choose three key or main districts in this region. And I think this is the first paper in this symposium that use survey data. Most of the research presented in the symposium are based on secondary data. I really appreciate the organizer to bring one of the paper to showcase here. So it's based on survey data, field work done by some of Gazi's colleague in Bangladesh. So they use two stage sampling method. First they did a simple random sampling to identify two main villages among that 3 districts. And the second is the systematic random sampling to identify 12 villages. But I think the data is presented just now is a bit updated. It shows 23 villages. So the household cover pretty much around 600 from 50 household in each of the villages. And the researcher used structured questionnaire for the research. So the main finding here, the interesting thing is the researcher actually first developed a theoretical model, and they found that a household decision to rely on remittance to reduce the likelihood and mitigate the severity of a storm inflicted damage depend on household marginal analysis of its private storm protection action. And this is also based on the behavioral economic perspective of marginal analysis. And in particular, actually, the author found a risk adverse household increasing remittance do lead to higher private adaptation finance in storm protection if expected marginal benefit is lower than expected marginal cost of private defensive spending. So after the author found the evidence from the theoretical model, they proceed to an empirical analysis where the main findings is the empirical, the positive effect of remittance on household expenditure or household improvement in the region. So in terms of strength, I would first say is definitely the data. It's a unique data set that came from the ground. And it also look into remittance, and it also look into climate exposure. It also looks into climate adaptation finance gap. Also research background and motivation is quite clear and very strong. Contribution of the paper is also defined very well. It contributes both in endogenous risk literature and remittance literature. But I really like the model and estimation of this paper. The author used behavioral economic theory also from the empirical model, and also a sort of case study flavor. A few comments from my side. Some point I actually a bit puzzled how I should actually define this paper contribution to adaptation finance or mitigation finance. I would suggest the author should look into or make more consistent with the explaining either they are really focusing on adaptation side or mitigation side. Second point I would say about hypothesis development. The author mentioned about the hypothesis, but I would really like to see how from the literature perspective they develop the hypothesis. The third one is about remittance versus ODA. This is a minor comment, I would say, because it briefly explained the global perspective, but if you just explain a bit about what is the differences or what is the relationship, what is the statistics from Bangladesh, and maybe sort of awareness or previous experience of cyclone could be one of the variable or one of the interests that can play a role in this year model, because I saw most of the household health education are not up to the higher secondary or tertiary, so they're not much educated. As you mentioned, they're relatively poor community, but maybe they have previous experience of the cyclone, because I understand the region is very prone to cyclone. Bit of analysis, but maybe some sort of robustness testing could be an added benefit. And also about the observation you already mentioned, so I would not touch this one. And one of the things I also like to highlight about the foreign and domestic remittance. You understand the foreign remittance, there is a variable you mentioned about the domestic remittances, and you have one variable, but I don't see any income. You have the foreign remittance received per month, but I didn't see any variable that how much actually the income from the from the domestic remittance in the variable, but I think that could be an additional input. Thank you.
Thanks, Iftikhar. Would you like to respond briefly, and then we may have time for one question?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Iftikhar. Yeah, you have all made all valid points. First of all, the domestic remittances, if for some reason, the way we were developing the idea of, like, you know, that how it happens, you know, how remittances affect the households, you know, so expenditures, expenditures and adaptation. This is more affected by, you know, the foreign remittances, because, you know, the migrant in the foreign country, they can have more impact on how their money will be invested. On the other hand, the domestic remittances, those who receive, the amount is very meager, and then it is mostly invested for you know, essential needs in the household. So those who are like only migrating in domestic level. So we are not getting the sort of results, significant results with domestic remittances. So we sort of excluded that in the end. And yes, you're right. Like, you know, we became confused with adaptation and mitigation, and then because we are not really sort of really specialized in those areas where we sort of differentiate between definitions. But yeah, I later found out that, you know, there are, like, you know, differences. So, you know, thanks for that. I mean, I will just sort of try to incorporate that, you know, when I go into another large scale study on this area. And then, yeah, I mean, the previous experience and all, these are all very valid questions, and I'll definitely try to do something when I go into a new survey soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I would suggest it's probably adaptation from what I've seen in the presentation. Any question? Oh, we've got one question in the chat from Professor Paul Griffin. Why wouldn't the expenditures drive the remittances? So why is it that way around? You know, the direction of the relation.
Yeah. So basically, yes, that is a very valid question. So this is the reason why we do the instrumental variable estimation, so that we can control for the reverse causality between this, and then, you know, try to identify cleanly that, you know, the causality is going from remittance to expenditures, by sort of developing a, you know, reduced form equation for remittances, and also you know, controlling for the exclusion, you know, the exclusion criteria. So we are, like, you know, not super confident, but, you know, in generally we are like slightly confident, or well, not slightly, we are kind of on average we're confident that, you know, the results identify the effect correctly.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all the speakers from that session. We're now going to have a short break before we get on to our last session of the conference. Thank you, everyone. 15 minutes.
Thank you very much.